Here on Silly Wales, we don't like to get too political, and we'll refrain from being too political. However, given the current conflict in the Middle East, it is painfully obvious that there is going to be a lot of general silence around, the horrors that go on there. My favorite sport, without a shadow of a doubt, is football. And whenever the international community loses a player, be it a legend, be it a rising star, be it someone who was just well loved and well respected, most of the football federations have something to say. Words of remembrance, maybe even a video, it might even make the news in some place. This, however, isn't the case. I'm going to read a tweet. I know, right? Reading a tweet from Layla Hamed. Just listen up. As bombs fall, Palestinian footballer Mohamed Barakat bids a tearful farewell message to beloved ones before an Israeli airstrike hit his home. He was one of the best scorers in Gaza. Still silence from FIFA, and not even a gesture to express the most basic level of concern. For me, as I try to be as apolitical as possible on this show, it's a time where it kind of just, it destroys the boundaries set. That is someone who effectively just had to say goodbye via video, and their passion is very similar to mine, and I'm sure hundreds of millions of people around the world. They just love football. No one deserves to die like that. And welcome to Silly Wales.
Welcome.
Yeah, no, like that actually upsets me. And I was thinking it's gonna come up eventually in our lives, that like as we make this show and it becomes popular, people are gonna want to eke out our political leanings more. And I was thinking, I just gotta stay apolitical everything, You can guess most things. Like you can guess that me and Joe are very hard right wing conservative people,
Yeah.
Like we hate minorities. We hate the gays too, But every now and then, stories come up, and then you realize, the idea of being apolitical is really is actually quite damaging to everything that you stand for as well. That story just kills because it's just like, hey, this is a guy who just enjoyed football and just wanted to live his life and enjoy football. He didn't ask for any of this, yet he is one of tens of thousands of people who have died just for reasons that they have no involvement in. But yeah, that's not political. That's just sad.
Yeah, war really sucks. War is awful. Sharik agrees. The dog agrees.
The dog agrees. This is Silly Wales. This is a mental health podcast. And if we caught you off guard and put you into a place where you're thinking quite negatively, well, join us for it. We discuss things such as mental health, mental illness, everything in and around between. This podcast is for everyone, but it might not be for you. And myself and Joe, we will not hunt you down. Joe and I will not chase after you. Joe and I will not reenact a fight scene from a Bollywood movie with you. We want to, but we won't.
Take your pick of which Bollywood film that we're describing in your head, whichever one you want the most.
We did 2 types of episodes. It's been a while since we recorded, so I figured I'm just gonna go over it. But for you guys, it was 6 days ago. So we do journals and we do deep dive episodes called Silly Wales Presents. This is a journal episode. Joe, it feels like I haven't recorded in about 4 weeks, but it's only been 2.
Yeah, it's definitely not my fault.
How dare you go on holiday and enjoy yourself?
Well, and then also not. It's actually been more than 2 weeks. The more I think about it, the more I realize it has been more than 2 weeks. It's been like the last recording we have is 21 days ago. So that's 3 weeks. That is actually 3
Jesus
weeks.
Christ.
Yeah. And that's entirely my fault. In part of it, I will the part that is my holiday, I would obviously be fine with, but the other part I'm not so fine with. Yeah. It's not really relevant for you as a viewer necessarily, or like listener rather, but it's just one of those things, I guess, as a little peek behind like all of this and the curtain, and I guess this is mental health. I don't quite understand what happened to me when I came back from holiday, because I felt pretty good, I would say, as an average. And then I it's weird to say, but it wasn't even about being on holiday, and I think it was more about me being in kind of the company of people that I care about, and having a lot and doing a lot of stuff, and having what felt like a good group around me, and like actively being amongst them and socializing, that made coming back somewhat cold. And I think I think I had what essentially would be like homesickness, but not quite, of just that feeling of I don't have that here. Like it just I didn't have the opportunity to do it. Because I was fine for the weekend. I went to see Kestis. I had a good time. But then after that, just the feeling of like nothing. Of just not having that around me was quite. I think it hit harder than I expected to. So it's interesting. Obviously, I could have found it by interacting with you, but it's just one of those things where I suddenly was like, I became frozen, and started doing the lovely avoidance behavior problems that I've always had, which is obviously not very helpful at all. That has plagued me from just learning it as a kid. So yeah, that we're recording on the 19th of March, which is a long time from the last time we recorded, and it's I'm glad to be back though. I feel a lot better. Uh, Everything is actually okay at the moment. This week definitely helped recover. Like from about Thursday, Wednesday onward, I did end up coming back a bit. So yeah, I think I'm done with my apologies. But I did need to just say it, just if not for the audience really, because the audience is not aware of it, but more so for you as well. Of just how things are, and I know it was annoying for you and stuff. So I apologize.
It's not enough for me at all. As I said, like the only thing I said is if I had known, because I was like, if you could give me a heads up that you're gonna do the avoiding thing, that would be great because then I could film on Monday and Tuesday or something. Um, but then I was like, in reality, what was I actually gonna do on that Monday and Tuesday? I wasn't gonna do anything because I was also in a state of like avoiding things and avoiding like the things that I actually want to do. So I just went. I got into a state this last week of just being very down and defeated, and I was like, well, this is great. Um, I'll take a little steps. Like I'll go to a Muay Thai class,
Mhm.
and then I would then get really tired, and then after the Muay Thai class, rather than go to the gym, I'll just go straight home, and I'll like somehow I'll blink, and it'll be like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, how did I even get here? And I have to wake up in 5 hours, and then so I got myself into an awful routine of that where
Yeah.
I would lose the day.
Hmm.
So like I'll blink and then it'll be like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm like, well, if I go to the gym, I won't get there until 9:45, and then I'll probably stay there until around 11:30, and I have to wake up again at like this time. So then I don't end up going to the gym. I was like, wow. And I realized it's been 3 weeks since I last went to the gym. So I was like, wow, this is the longest I've probably been about going to the gym in about, I'll say, maybe 2 years, two, three, four, maybe 4 or 5 years.
I mean, even though that's obviously not necessarily a good thing, like I mean, it's commendable that it took that long before it happened. Like that's a
Yeah,
decent
yeah.
streak of time of doing pretty
Especially
well.
because of like my overall issues with consistency and sticking to things. Sticking to a diet or weight program is a whole different story. But just going and being there is something. Yeah. So yeah, it was a big old struggle this week, and then I finally went. I went to Muay Thai yesterday. Uh, got my ass beat, and then went to the gym after and just did more work on the heavy bag. I wasn't lifting any weights, but I was like, cool. I'm at the gym. I'm there. So then now I think that sets the routine back in place. So like after this, like we record this, I'm probably going to go straight there. And then if I lift weights or whatever, great. If I don't, then just hit the bag, great. Like I'm just focusing on being there. And if I can be there, then eventually I'll do whatever I need to do, like as time progresses. But I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Um, it's just yeah, everything got fucked.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, especially with me anyway, when it comes to avoiding things and more specific, actually, I was going to say more specifically avoiding people, but actually, I very much avoid things consistently. So it's not really just people. But I think what bothers me more is the way in which I avoid people more than anything. Because when I do, the the truth of it is that there's in kind of two aspects of this. On the one aspect, I know that or not even I know, sometimes it takes me after the experience to kind of remember. And it's one of those things that I still have to become sort of naturally conscientious of for myself, like naturally aware that I can go, okay, you're feeling this way, but which is I'm aware that if I'm interacting with people, and a lot of the time it doesn't take a lot to please me as a person, just interacting with someone, even in a small way, the small victories I can gain just by being with other people makes me feel better. So naturally, then the avoidance is so much in the wrong direction. It's not only that I'm doing this because I feel bad, but it's like you are going to continue to feel bad because you know that, and you know that if you had actually gone through with it, then suddenly you would feel better. That little victory would have helped you, like the dopamine or the serotonin or whatever would have made you feel better, and you would have gone throughout the week or the next day or through work feeling better. I I can't even remember what it was. Like literally just a couple of days ago, I was like playing a game, and stuff went really well in it. And I was just thinking, and the next day I was like thinking to myself, oh, I was really happy with that. And I was really happy with like how I dealt with fasting at the moment, and stuff like that. These little things made me feel good. And when I had done it, the fact that the fact that I felt better and that it carried forward like to today, at some level, has made me, just makes me think of what I'm missing when I am avoiding people and so on. And then the second aspect which is the kind of recognition of where this kind of action is ultimately not maliciously selfish, but has a selfish aspect, is the fact that I would have helped you, or I would have helped other people by interacting, and that, there are things that other people, and that there's a symbiotic or mutual benefit that is provided by existing in the world and being in the world and interacting with people that goes beyond you. Like getting too stuck in your own head has such negative effects in the sense for yourself, but a negative effect in the sense of what could have been, like for everything, for the interaction externally. And I'm not saying that in a I'm being really hard on myself aspect. This is just more my general understanding of the world and me recognizing quite practically, I feel, because I don't feel bad about it in a like in like a self-deprecating, like, or not self, like in a self like attacking way. I just recognize that I could have done better, and it's not and it's just something I need to consider and contextualize. And I think part of the problem is that I have like a perfection issue where I think that if I'm not my best, then I don't want to be around because if I'm not my best, then I'm not providing any, So there's definitely like things I'm trying to uncover and unpack, but in the moment as well, like having the awareness consistently when you're in those spaces to actually like think about it and do something about it, or recognize it and go, nope, I'm not getting stuck in this funk, I'm doing something, is something I've never really been able to do. And probably only over the last few years have I even started to actually recognize that and make proactive decisions rather than reactive decisions to my emotions in that way. So yeah, it's definitely, it just feels like the worst of all things, in many ways. And I just know that ultimately, if you had come to me, like if you were nearby and you could have come see me, or even if or even if, you had, I don't actually know. I don't think you could have done anything specifically now that I think about it, because I think I was in that space like that. I'd
Yeah, I've
already,
never been able.
I
I've
was
never
already stuck in it,
forced you. I've never
Yeah,
been able to force you ever into. I think you're surprisingly good at being elusive.
I suppose so. Um, it, it's always interesting because I almost wish that people would force themselves upon me, but I know that when that's limited and when I have the power over it, like in that scenario where you have to call me, you have to message me, stuff like that, then suddenly when I have that power, it's too easy for me to go, it's better this way. Do you know what I mean? Like making the
Yeah,
decision on behalf of you and everything else, that like, oh, it's better that I don't now. And there is definitely a selfish element I can tell emotionally where I'm like, I don't want him to see me now. As in, like, I don't want him to see the mistake I've made. I don't want to be a fuck up. But that's ultimately very childish, if you know what I mean. Like that's the non mature and not helpful and not useful or practical or beneficial to anyone notion of of things, and it just comes from, it comes from a place. But yeah, so I don't know how to. I'm talking more because I don't know how to spin off this, so I'm just going to pass on.
Nah, like I didn't realize how avoidant like how avoidant behavior, I guess, manifests in that way as well. Like I think people are avoidant to different things. So I'm avoidant to things that I need to get done. Um, and I always leave myself to the last minute to do it. So even me on a coaching course right now, like I see all the work that needs to be done, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, okay, I can do it. And then, as I said before, I close my eyes, and then the whole day's gone. I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, how did we get here? And it's just, yeah, it's wild. So I'm avoidant to tasks that I need to do, and there's no like motivating me to do it or anything like that, because a lot of these tasks that I know I need to do.
Yeah,
So it's like only I can keep myself on I guess on task, which I wouldn't trust myself to do anything really. So
yeah.
it's yeah, go on.
I don't know if you feel the same way. It's like I don't want to be. I'm using this terminology very explicitly because I know what it sounds like. I don't want to be dominated.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
I really don't. Like, I have no desire for that kind of thing. I don't want someone who is like, unless I consent. Again, I'm using this language specifically. Unless I'm consenting to someone like a personal trainer style thing, where I'm like, personal trainer, I just want you to make me do whatever you say. Like, and I'm not gonna, and you're just gonna basically force me because I need that. I need the um I need the push, even if I'm not like, and it's not motivation. Like it's not really a motivation thing that they're doing to me there. It's more of a feeling of um a feeling of it's worth doing because you're telling me, right? It's not it's like I'm evaluating things better because you're explaining it to me, and like that style of stuff I could kind of get. I could imagine like having that, although I would never actually be able to afford or really want to actually get a personal trainer to do that, though I know there are people who do. Um, but I really do like people kind of pushing themselves into my life, if that makes sense. Like putting their foot in the door, because I will just keep the door closed. I just won't open it, and that's the problem. I will just kind of not do things. So I mean this podcast, even though up to that point and so on, has been a great example of that, because of its kind of, yeah, we're making this happen and we're doing it. And even though I regularly don't know how to feel about the podcast or my aspect within it or anything, like I regularly think to myself, okay, well, am I even saying anything worthwhile and things like that. It's it still doesn't matter, because I still come out at the end of it having enjoyed the experience. And at the same time, when I do listen back, I'm like, hey, I did say some interesting things. Not all of it necessarily, but some of it was good. Some of it I think is worth being heard. And trying to imagine someone else hearing me for the first time is difficult. But hearing myself recorded back and being like, and thinking this person doesn't feel like me because it's not coming out of my head, it's coming from externally. I'm like, oh, okay, there is something there. It's just holding that information in my head. It's like a working memory problem. It's like I can't hold the information in my head, like that kind of information, that knowledge and awareness in my head, to be able to recognize like how I should be understanding the situation, how I should be understanding what is best for me and what's the right thing to do. Because so rarely, and when I say so rarely, I kind of almost mean all the time, is my actual desire to have my own space, or like not do something or whatever. Very rarely, I should say, is it actually a good thing. Like sometimes when it's obviously like I'm ill or whatever, it's like fine, I'm ill. Like I'm not going out tonight because I'm physically ill, and if I drink, I'm going to throw up without even being drunk. You know what I mean? So, and that kind of thing. So it's definitely it's definitely an aspect of myself that I recognize, but it's not an aspect of myself that I can improve because it relies on other people. So I need to do the thing for myself, which is I need to be my own person telling myself the things that I need other people to tell me to do, or that I need to have the ability to say, don't forget that this person will make you feel better, like, and things like that, the kind of the subtle reminders of quite explicit reminders to myself of what I should be trying to do there. Yeah. Oh my god, it feels so long. Why does life feel both like so long, and why does this whole experience of learning to become a better person and look after myself, why is it such a struggle? Why is change such a struggle? My god.
Because it's different, and we're used to like being comfortable within our feelings, despite them being bad. You know, like we feel comfortable with the sadness, so we stay in the sadness, and we're afraid of finding out the the what could be greener grass. Because we're comfortable. Like you're anxious all the time, and you know that if you see a therapist, it'll probably get better. But then you're afraid of booking the therapy appointment because why? Because you're afraid of that change that could come. What happens if I don't feel anxious anymore? What happens if I feel worse? It's like you don't know. Just do it. You know.
I don't know if I have that mentality. Like, I mean, I probably do at some level, but I can't say for certain that I've ever actually thought, what happens if I don't feel this way? Like, for me, that is the ultimate goal, if you know what I mean. Like, there's definitely an element I agree with you where I'm like, I definitely am more comfortable in just being sad. Like, I'm content with the lot I have, if that makes sense. I'm not really ambitious in the way enough at a certain level to, or not even ambitious, but I'm just not like, it's a weird thing. There are moments where I'm incredibly ambitious and I have such lofty goals, and I also have moments where I'm like really hating where I'm at, and then that kind of goes away as soon as I start feeling better at all, like, or I feel kind of to a sort of more neutral state where emotionally I'm not feeling the anger or the frustration or whatever, and I'm not, and that does, and so then I don't actually have the motivation to push me forward. You know, I'll have like the sadness in the moments that will motivate me to do nothing, but I won't have the anger to motivate me to do something. You know what I mean? Like there's some disconnect, or there's either some disconnect or there's some psychological structure, or maybe something that I can't control, that's not necessarily nurture based or whatever, that means I'm currently not feeling those kind of emotions anymore the way that I used to. The way I used to sometimes when I was a kid, for example, has kind of disappeared to a certain extent. I've got to find my inner child. I think I have to find my inner child.
Well, what do you mean by finding a job?
I don't know. There are times when I think about, I think it's when I'm thinking about prior to depression, and when I'm thinking about prior to, because obviously I was always autistic, but the idea that like at one point in my life I was, I was happy. I was also very frustrated, but I was happy, right? Like life was loads of ups and downs, but it was, huge peaks and low valleys, but at a certain level, like my actual kind of natural pattern throughout it was relatively high, or relatively good. Things were good enough that I was like, okay, well, or not good enough. Things were great in a way until a certain point when things started to change around me. I've talked about this before with the primary school. Things changed around me and everything sort of took a dive. And when it took that dive, ever since then, it feels like the peaks haven't been as high and the valleys haven't been so low. And except they start to feel really high and low because I've become more normal and like more used to uh, a a plane that has no peaks and valleys at all. So suddenly, when I used to have Mount Everest and the Marianas Trench, it's like, okay, now I have, I don't know, Snowdon and some, I don't know, I can't think of a low, shallow valley, Lee Valley. There you go. And then it's and it's Lee Valley, and it's like, okay, well, these are clearly not the same as Mount Everest and Marianas Trench, but again, I still, but I was always high above the ground throughout that entire time. Whereas now I'm very much on the ground, you know? So I don't know what it comes to or what it comes down to, but there is a part of me that wants to tap back into the part of me that it's not that I don't care as much or I don't think as much, but there's a part of me that wants to shake off a little bit of the amount of almost self-control that I'm putting on myself in moments where I probably don't need it, like where I'm trying to control a lot, and then so that I have energy to put into the places where it needs it, if that makes sense. Obviously, I don't want to just be complete and utter id and impulse, because I have to deal with that all the time. It's just that's in my comfort, right? I want my energy to be in the moments of my comfort, to be able to say, don't just follow your id and impulse, do something else, as opposed to, and then in those moments, like social moments, where I'm just maybe a little bit more free and loose with myself, and I'm not trying to put on, a bit like more like how I am right now with you, as opposed to, and even then, like I could get a bit more weird with you and Kestis even and things like that. Whereas with, when I'm at work or just in general life, I'm constantly kind of unsure and not allowing myself to do certain things. There's a lot of self-doubt, I guess, at a certain level, that I'm constantly like applying to my day-to-day life, where I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I don't do this or do that, or I need to think about what this person might think of me doing this and that and so on. And it's just exhausting. It's just a tiring thing to do. And I would like to be able to just go, okay, let me just kind of, hey, I think of something, I'm going to say it or do it, and just kind of run with it for a moment and see if it's okay. Like if it works and no one's bothered by it, then why am I self-censoring myself almost more than I need to, right? I'm not allowing myself the opportunity to play and kind of and learn through play. I'm basically setting myself a bunch of rules that I'm trying to follow as best as possible, but it means I have to constantly look down and read the rules over and over again as I'm just going about daily life, as opposed to just kind of picking it up as I go along. And
Like, do you feel like
yeah,
you're like censoring yourself in a way, or like limiting yourself?
I think that I think there are times where I'm observing a lot. Like I observe a lot, I realize, in situations, because there are moments where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything um, self-sensory, so to speak. But then there are moments where I realize I'm just kind of watching what's happening and I'm not allowing myself to engage. And part of the reason, I think, is because I'm not quite sure what I should do. And this is a really weird thing, but I don't know. I'm sure you might have come to this as well at some point, but I think I still have a lot of the feelings about how adults should act and things like that from before I became an adult. So when I'm obviously at work, I'm surrounded by people younger than me, older than me, whatever, and there's lots of things that people say and do which is completely harmless and fun, and there's nothing wrong with it. That still at a certain level, I'm not. I realize I'm stopping myself from doing, if you know what I mean, because I'm worried about the outcome of it, because I don't think that's how an adult should act or something like that. There's some part of me that's like, I'm not sure what to do or say, and I've been learning that you can kind of get away a lot more than I am initially thinking. I mean, I watch D&D on YouTube and Twitch and stuff, and these people that I'm watching are mid-30s, in a lot of cases, and it's like that's not that different an age from me, and even if it wasn't that different an age from me, that's someone who's older than me specifically, and they're saying stuff, and they're making jokes that I would almost just wouldn't make, not because of any good reason, but just because there's a part of me that still feels that's not what the adults do. That's what my age bracket does, kind of thing. That's what the people I listen to say and do, as if like it's like the adults don't understand kind of way. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, the adults
Yeah,
don't get it. But I've carried that into adulthood as if that's how adults are, even though I am the adult now. And even then, you have
yeah,
like people who are way older who will make those jokes and understand what you're talking about and realize this is not a new thing. This has always been the case. People have been making fucking sex jokes and shit jokes for fucking like hundreds of thousands of years, basically. There's no point at where that stopped. So it's weird. I don't know how to explain it properly, but maybe this is getting through to someone. But I don't quite know how to articulate it well. But maybe that's making sense. The way in which I'm self-censoring here or whatever. So yeah, like I said, there's part of me that wants to kind of not think about that and just see how I react or do things based on that. So
Yeah, like especially when you said about making jokes, like a lot of the time, like I went through a decent stage in my life where I would just constantly just impulse say like the joke that came into my head.
Mhm.
Um, and like now I'm a lot more controlled of it. So I could now say it in my head and then move on from it. And now I think I'll say the impulse joke. Like there's always one joke that comes to my head, you know. So let's have if you have 10 moments where it happens, I'll probably actually say the joke maybe 2 times out of the 10 now.
Mhm.
Um, and 5, 6 years ago, it was like 8 times out of 10. I'm always saying it.
Yeah.
It's like you that way I think it's helped me out because when I do come out with a joke, it does sound very out of left field. So then if you have my sense of humor, you're in. Great, and you like it. And if you don't, then it's also so far out of left field that I'm able to go, that's a joke. However,
Yeah.
before I used to say it all the time, and then everyone just expected that level of humor. And it wasn't specifically dark or offensive. It just was very out of left field, you know? It would
Mhm.
just be like, how did you connect that together? You know? Yeah. So I just think about it now. I'm thinking, okay, as an adult, I've toned it down clearly. Um, because social interactions are that difficult. Because you're like, hey, you don't want to like upset people. You don't want to really maybe your first impression. You don't want it to be one of like, oh, he made the really offensive joke. You're trying to actually hold yourself to a standard here, and the standard is so shit. But like, because in my ideal world, I can say all the jokes 10 times out of 10, and if people laugh, people laugh. If they don't, they don't. And if it's offensive, check me. Um,
Mhm.
but like again, I find it very difficult to be offensive with humor. So when I hear all the stories of people claiming that comedy is really offensive, or people claiming that they've been cancelled because of their jokes, I'm like, I don't think you have. I think there's probably more to it that you're just not explaining.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely part of some social fabric that I don't get, and there'll be loads of people listening to this that don't get anything of what I'm talking about. Like to them, this is not making any sense necessarily because I don't and in that sense, I'm not sure if I can uh, import onto you that feeling or what I'm even meaning by it, you know. But there are moments where someone will say something, and I think, even if I think it's funny or even if I think it's a good, even if I don't think it's necessarily a good joke, it's just funny, right? Which is, that's a sort of oxymoron, if anything. But you get what I mean. I enjoy the joke, but I don't. But it's not like well done. You get what I mean? It's not like a crafted thing. And I'm like, and I think to myself like, oh god, or I say something like that or whatever because there's a part of me that doesn't know how I should react because I'm not allowing myself to just kind of like go with it. I'm preventing my reaction to it to a certain extent. And I don't think I'm helping anything. Like, and that's the problem is I'm not sure what's being benefited by it, but it's just my trying to be like, okay, well, would I have done that? Probably not. So now I feel not because I think it's bad, but just because I'm like, well, what if it is bad to do that? And again, because I'm someone who, if you're with me, you can kind of get away with a lot of shit. So it's not a big, same as you. Like we can get away with a lot with each other, but the idea that somehow, even if someone was doing that with me, that if I react in a way, if I react positively to it or mutually to it, that somehow I'm crossing potentially a barrier is bizarre. But it's part of it's part of the lawful good side of me that's like I have to do it in a certain way. I have to be in a certain way, and that's just not true. And um, can I give a shout out to a YouTube channel and like
Yeah, sure.
general group of people? This is quite famous, so it's not that huge a shout. It's not like a momentous shout or anything, but it's Dropout, which was College Humor. I think used to be that and stuff like that. But basically, I've been watching a lot of that because of D&D and Dimension 20 is their like D&D thing. but as a result, I've also been watching a lot of their other shows and content. And it's really interesting. The thing that hit me recently, because again, this is relatively recent, was the experience of watching kind of slightly counterculture esque content, and I mean actual counterculture as opposed to like just being edgy or anything like that. Like genuinely quite wholesome, but also quite like fuck the rules counterculture, also, and also a little bit of like, hey, we can get away, we can say this shit is not a problem because we all here are fine with it and everything. And there was a part of me that was sort of like, I don't feel like I see that enough, because whether it's, I doubt it's an English thing or whatever, but there's definitely in a sort of, in a way, I could say that there seems to be some agreement about reservedness of English people. So even though I know that's not true for most people, but I think it's a kind of general average, it could be said maybe. And the level to which that there is this weird kind of experience that I have with people where I feel like we could be having more interesting engagements with each other, but we're not, is, and maybe that's also generational, like that, like some of the people in the shop that I see when they come in and I'm serving them and stuff, some of them really great, really good fun to talk to. Some of them really just, they are the most like stereotypically seemingly boring people that like not even like kind of boring in that as in like they've kind of resigned themselves to boredom, but they're not a bad person kind of thing. I mean like a person who is clearly like, we would never get along and we wouldn't have a good conversation with each other because we're existing in different worlds. Like our brains and what we're used to and what we've grown up with and how we see the world is just so different that me and you cannot like have this cannot work with each other like this, unless we had like a bunch of time and we knew that was the goal. You know what I mean? So maybe there's something there that but I've always had this slight feeling of something that I saw a lot on, and again, it's also crafted, it's social media-esque, right? YouTube is social media. So I'm seeing like a constructed version of everything. But there's a part of me that's like, oh man, I do kind of wish that we could just, get rid of the fucking like weird tradition or like social traditions that we really don't need, like for the most part, and just kind of say whatever, like we can just kind of go, okay, look, you and I both know that we're like, even though we're strangers, there's nothing wrong with, I can talk to you even as a customer talking to another customer, I could talk to you in a shop having not met you before, and there's going to be no weirdness, right? Cool. And so I like talk to people randomly, and it feels good when I do it because it's never met with a bad reply. Like I never get a bad reply, but I'm like the only person doing it. So there's just this real weird oppressive, like, or not oppressive, but this like general feeling of like, not much of that lack of social engagement and so on. And it's like, okay, well, this just feels bad. this feels like I can't do certain things. I think that's what it comes down to ultimately, is that the environment affects me so much that unless other people are kind of doing it as well, I feel like I can't do it for the most part unless I'm in a very specific social setting. And then suddenly I have no problem with doing that and being more myself. I don't even like saying that, but like more, I guess, um, uh, like clean with my personality, I suppose. Like I'm not trying to change anything about it, or maybe dirty with my personality, if you want to think of it that way. Like I'm not trying to clean up my personality before I send it out. It's just as it comes. It's out the box. It's out the can. That's just there. I don't know if any of this is making sense to you, by the way. I realize like I'm just talking about it, but this might not mean anything to you. I'm not. I don't know.
No, I mean something like things. It's a lot. It takes a lot for something to make zero sense. Like it might not be the most relatable thing in the world to one person, but it might be the whole. You might explain the whole like sphere of understanding for somebody else, and now they're like, "Oh my goodness, this guy gets it." You know.
Mm.
I was just thinking about more so like planning and for the future and things like that, as well as
Yeah.
just like I think like societally how things feel. Like, do I still feel like I'm constrained in how I interact? I'm like, well, yeah, where I work right now doesn't really know about like my neurodivergency or things like that. I'm still very much I hate the word neurodivergent. It makes me cringe. And I don't know why. I think it's just because of how it was probably used. I think I had a really annoying person use the word first, so now I associate that word with a really annoying person. But anyway, plan ahead. I'm very much in a state where I'm like, I don't really talk about it. I don't talk about what I have, so there's no strategy in place to help me because I don't need help. I'm just like, is this how I'm going to live my life though? Because whenever I've been open about the neurodivergency, I felt like I've been treated worse. So I'm like, hmm. So I was just thinking more, do I limit myself socially in an effort to preserve things like my general, I guess, my overall well-being because of how you'll be treated, or do I be open with it and hope for the best? I hope I wouldn't
Hmm.
be judged, but then I'm always gonna feel like I'm gonna be judged, you know?
The thing is, are you being? I mean, I don't know. This is me asking myself as well when I ask this question. Is it the case that I guess because I'm not really thinking about it that way, maybe this is more for you. But is it more so that you're worried about being judged as a person irrelevant of your neurodivergence, or is it because of your neurodivergence that you're being like? Is it if you were just more open with who you were in that way? There was again, social constraints are natural. There's nothing wrong with social constraints. I don't think that there's a problem with it because it's not just you, and therefore there must be social constraints. If there's no social constraints, you're a psychopath. Or a sociopath. You're genuinely just not thinking about how other people are, or you're not even attempting. I mean, think of any team sports or whatever. Like, if you were just not thinking about how anyone else felt, then you're fucking up the team, right? So there's clearly a necessity there, but there's obviously a level of personality and being yourself, which is completely fine. And at worst is someone says like someone can check you on it, like at worst. But I guess specifically in the judgment side of things, which again is where I'm also partly coming through. I just don't think about neurodivergence specifically, but because I'm generally telling everyone that I'm of my neurodivergence and all that. So when it comes to that, is it more so you being neurodivergent that's being judged, or is it just your personality in and of itself, regardless, like that when you're being yourself in that case that you're worried about being judged?
You tell people at work about it.
Well, I had to because I didn't have to actually. That's not true, but I did because I did at my interview because they asked about it. Um, because I'd put it on the timeline for my CV in describing the mental health journey that led to a large gap where I wasn't working or in education. Um, so I was explaining that gap and explaining that I was dealing with things at the time. Then also there's like the kind of diversity style surveys that you get at work, kind of exploring that and asking like do you have this, do you consider yourself to have a disability, blah blah blah. So I definitely have. And then there are people at work who, like, there's someone at work who has OCD, for example, who I've spoken to about it and stuff. It's not to like literally everyone, or I'll have a really bad day, and sometimes it's not worth me describing to people. It's not worth like we've now reached the point, especially because there are people, a lot of the people I work, a decent number of people I work with are even younger than me, and tend to be a lot better about understanding things like depression and anxiety and so on. So when I explain, so sometimes I'm feeling really, really bad, and it's visible that I'm feeling bad, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm just like, I just explain to them because it's easier to do that rather than me making something up, if that makes sense. I even had a security guard who was bipolar, for example, and at ADHD, who I met and spoken to, for example. So there's there's enough of it, and there's enough of awareness, at least at my workplace, that I didn't feel uncomfortable about it.
Well, like, cause I, I work in a school, and I've not like specialized in just that, and I don't like at all ever feel comfortable disclosing to them that because I think what would happen is similar to how I was in Calais. Really, like everything's fine until I said I had it, and all of a sudden everyone's speaking with really slow, simple words, and it's like, well, it's already very white. A lot of you guys are very white savory in your mindsets. It doesn't help that you guys are now speaking to one of one black people around in very simplified English, despite him being pretty good at English. Um, I think I'm afraid of that repeat happening. So I still am. So if people find out, people find out. But I want people to find out and for them to be like, oh, we had no idea. But, you know, that's never going to happen because of how people are. I think I mentioned it before. The thing I hate the most is someone goes, oh, I knew you had it. No, you didn't. Shut the fuck up. Like, there's a lot of, I think, I don't know. It felt like a few years back I was super like open about it, and now I've like, closed myself off.
Mm.
When I get a new job, I'm not telling the new job until like it comes up, and I go, by the way, yeah, like but
I
yeah,
guess I think it's partly because I've not had so many of the experiences that you've described to me that I don't have the wounds of feeling like that backlash will occur if I say certain things. It's just, I mean, especially if I talk about something like depression, a lot of people aren't, the people around me generally aren't going to be like, oh, I thought you were depressed. Like I wouldn't expect that. And I've not had, very rarely do people actually pin me on anything or try to pin me on anything for whatever reason that is. I don't know, but I've not. Maybe it's just partly because of the jobs that we've been in. Like I'm not in the kind of job where I'm necessarily going to be surrounded by people who are going to be like that kind of what is it called when you're like is it couch psychologist? Is that what it's called?
yeah, armchair
Armchair
psychologist,
psycho.
armchair
Yeah,
therapist, or whatever.
yeah, like I'm not going to be surrounded by armchair therapists in my job. It's not in the kind of jobs I've been doing. It's not like people aren't really doing that sort of thing. Um, People might have ideas about it, but generally not like to the level of where I could expect with the stuff you've done, where it feels like that's much more likely. Um, in the unfortunate way. By the way, you're talking about that and the thing you were talking about earlier with the word neurodivergence. I had the same thing with trigger, like being triggered and things like that, which I've now completely taken into my lexicon. I have no problem with it now. But I remember when it was first being used, even though I understood it and I didn't like disrespect it being used, every time there were so many negative examples of it being used on so many moments where it was used in a way that made it much more cringe. And I remember hating the like hearing it, and it used to bother me a lot more. But now I've gotten used to it. So maybe it's just a matter of time away from the bad examples of it, and then
Yeah,
the cringe examples. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, like, I think like that's it. Like I hate the word like trigger warning as well, and the phrase trigger warning. And it's like I when I hated it, I didn't understand it, and now I understand it. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. So I'm happy to keep using it, and as I keep using it, the cringiness of it wears away. It's more like I now get cringe by secondhand reactions to the word. So when I hear people go, when I hear people say things like, oh, you need a trigger warning, like that's what makes me cringe. I'm just like, oh, you don't understand, like, you know, you want to be told, like you would want to be told if you're about to see something really bad and dangerous to you. And the
Mhm.
whole idea of people going, oh, trigger warnings are for weak people, it's really funny because like those same people, if you just say something mean about their favorite football team, they're crying and they're like trying to throw hands with you, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I
pretty
was
sure they
just
could have
thinking
done with
about
a.
that.
I'm pretty sure they could have done with a fucking trigger warning or two there. Like, oh, they're gonna talk about my football club. Like, it's all there. These words aren't changing the world or like reinventing the wheel. No, it's just words that are now added to our repertoire and our dictionaries that are convenient to use.
Yeah, I feel like it is funny because the insult, like the level to which someone insulting you is just in any way, not even you necessarily, but like that example you gave, and it's just like, well, like clearly that justifies violence. That's
Yeah,
justified. That is such a perfect example of where like you're fragile enough to let it bother you in that way because and your justification is, well, it fares fair now, I can beat you up or something. And it's like, it's not even like I've said that much. It's not I'm not even like attacking something like something. I'm not using a racist slur or anything. I'm not doing anything like that. Neither are you. It's just literally like someone gets pissed off about something, and it's like, well, yeah, you got pissed off by it. That's the point. Like, you are now beginning to understand why certain things people don't want to experience, and some of those things obviously we can talk about in a more kind of contextualized way in society about whether or not certain things should be, should be, whether certain topics can be broached or whatever, just because of this element, this element of like, let's be careful. But normally that's what the whole point of trigger warning is. It's saying like, hey, this is what we need to talk about this, but not everyone, much in the way of the beginning of this podcast. Like, we're telling you now because it will come up. We're not going to stray from talking about it, but we're going to have to put the point across that it's going to happen, because we don't want people to have to deal with it, and because they shouldn't have to, and it's not really fair. You're not forced to, as long as you're not like completely ignoring its existence. Then it's okay that you just don't want to be. If this genuinely affects you, that you don't want to be affected by it. So, but yeah, it's hilarious to me that the fragility of people who are like talk
You
about
seemingly
snowflakes.
disappeared.
I've not disappeared. I'm still here. How dare you? I'm totally here.
Uh,
Oh, if this,
just don't know what's happened though.
I hope the recording has still got me talking while he's also talking, and this will just come up in the edit. Oh boy, I think I'm still here. I hope that some people are understanding where I'm coming from, because I don't know how to articulate it, and maybe there's something I'm missing, or maybe it's just a case of me that I simply need to, put it bluntly, or simply get over myself. Maybe that's what it comes down to ultimately, or like that idea is the ultimate. That's the simplified notion of it, not the nuanced version, but the simplified notion of it. And I'm cool with understanding that that's as a simplified notion, but the nuanced version is what I'm looking for, the nuanced way. And the reason is because I need to have an actual like set of actions that I can partake in, like I can do or I can think about. And because ultimately I can go through moments by saying, just get over it, or get over yourself, or you can sort this out. But that doesn't work that doesn't work really very long at all. The stamina will drain, the energy will drain, and eventually I can't do that again. So yeah, we'll see. This is taking ages, boy. Oh my god.
Um, yeah. To close, I was like, yeah, having technical difficulties there. I don't know what you were talking about.
Well, I stopped when I realized that you were talking about what you were talking about, and then I just talked specifically on my own, saying like the trying to understand things, to the audience.
Oh yeah, fair enough. 'Cause I was gonna go into talking about relationships and how like it's difficult to gauge like someone's interest in you, or like even platonic friendships, or like someone's willingness to like someone who wants to hang out with you and things like that. It's difficult to gauge. Um, and reading that and then opening up to them about the condition that you may have. But yeah, I kind of got derailed, so that'll be for next episode that we'll hopefully record either this week or early next week. But
Yeah, I'd love to do it this week if possible.
yeah, we will. Um, but yeah, guys, we're back. I want to have an upload schedule. I'm hoping it'll be every single Tuesday, but it might not be. So I'm gonna say expect a release either Monday or Tuesday. In between those days, it should always be in the morning. I'm gonna try and be consistent with it, so then it's always there. But yeah, this is City Wells. Anything to add, Joe?
I want to get back into the swing of this. I'm already liking it again. I want to get back into it.
Yeah.
This is enjoyable. I even though again I don't know how much of this is great or whatever, but I enjoy it, so I'm fine.
Oh, yeah. I imagine this episode, not much of it is great because I've probably not been connected properly at all. Who knows? We'll find out in the post recording. But
Find
yeah,
out.
that's it. Guys, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the win. See ya.